back to Contemporary Black Voices right here at Black Video Network. And we were in the middle of a discussion on Pan-Africanism, and we are elated that our guest is going to stay with us for the second session.
Thank you.
Because we need your knowledge.
Well, we need to have this discussion as a family and a community, so
Gotcha.
thank you.
Okay. There,
Yes,
there
sir.
goes the cultural value, right?
Yes.
Okay. Caleb, you want to pick up?
Yeah. So what I was the point I was making before at the end of the first segment was that I think that Pan-Africanism it incorporates not only the culture that was built in America, but it incorporates the culture that was built in the Afro-Caribbean culture, the Afro as far as the Afro-Brazilian culture, and the rest of the African culture that was established and developed in South America. And so it's a rich tapestry of various cultures that come together. And so yeah, we can have a culture here. We can have even on the African continent. There's a diversity of culture, a diversity. There's a linguistic diversity. There's just like I say, a cultural diversity. There's even a genetic diversity. And so Africa's probably has the most genetic diversity of any place on earth. And so, but it does come together and it does form this rich Pan-African tapestry. And so American culture that was developed post-slavery is part of that broader tapestry.
Why do you say post-slavery?
I'm sorry. So, I mean, American that was developed even during slavery.
We concentrate too much on the hours that our ancestors were in the field. What I concentrate on is 9 o'clock at night, 4 o'clock in the morning, when they had to be in those slave cabins and they had to figure out how to survive. They started to build that culture, and it's beautiful what they're able to do.
Absolutely.
And as you know, the oppressor always made sure, if they could, that you didn't have slaves from the same village. They tried to make sure they didn't do that. So what they had to do was even to create a way to communicate. And so let me ask you this question, Brother Anda. Are you going to have one language? Pan-Africanism call for one language. What's that language going to be?
You know, in 1974, they had a Pan-African conference in Tanzania. And they really selected a Pan-African language. Of course, first of all, on the continent of Africa, there are over 2,000 languages spoken, you know. And we struggling here. we speak Ebonics here, so we got our cultural, you know, diversity. But the idea is that they chose the language of Kiswahili as the language of Pan-Africanism. And this language is being adopted because it's the most widely spoken language on the continent of Africa. And this language is now being shared through other nations. And also the African Union has embraced the idea of using Kiswahili as a Pan-African language. So as we embrace this language, then it becomes actually, I think, a universal language for us. Because if you have enough people committed to that language, which you have power, other people will be forced to also embrace that language, just like we've been forced to embrace English and Chinese.
And then, just another quick point. So there's 54 million Swahili speakers, but Swahili is a part of the Bantu family language group. And so if you expand it to basic Bantu, now you're talking about over 200 million speakers. And so they chose Kiswahili, but you can even broaden that out because it's kind of like going from French to Spanish or Spanish to Portuguese. And so the root word is there as far as basic Bantu. So you actually have more than 200 million or 250 million people that can actually form a common linguistic group.
But I would also say this, that I think that would empower us and give us greater unity and strength. But if we even speak different languages, we still have, I think, the language of, I would say, the language of love and respect. See, we might speak different languages, but if we can respect each other and we can show human and respect each other human rights, then we can build the unity. And I would just say one other thing, Mr. Williams, is that, and this is why I think it's very important that we go beyond the shores of America, because our history as a people does not begin here in America in slavery. Our history goes back beyond the shores of America it begins in Africa. And I like to use the term enslaved African instead of saying slaves, because we were not brought here as slaves. We were brought here as enslaved Africans. Now, we were dropped off in different parts of the world, but we were enslaved Africans, meaning that we had a way of life. We had a cultural identity. We had a history. We were builders of nations. So we were brought here to build a nation, and we have done our job. So I like to make that point because I think it takes us always back around to the very point of Pan-Africanism, identifying ourselves with Africa and not just starting here in slavery.
Okay. What about, not on camera, I'm looking at two ladies off camera who are not dark skinned. They're light. What about that? What about that? I mean, evidently that came from Europe, right? That came from Europe.
Not necessarily.
Well, I mean, again, Africa is the most genetically diverse continent, and so you have people that are very tall in stature, like the people of South Sudan. You have people that are very short in stature, like the Pygmy. You have an entire genetic group, like the San people in South Africa, and so there is genetic diversity in Africa, and so you have people that run the gambit from very, very dark to very, very light.
So you're saying, what you're saying then, the light skin comes from Africa too. It doesn't come from Europe.
No, well, here it can, and so there are light-skinned people in Africa that were born that way.
I'm asking you, are
here
you
in
saying,
this, no, I'm saying here in this country, we understand the legacy and the history
Right.
of slavery.
we don't like it? Okay.
Of course not.
None of us like that our grandmothers and great-great-grandmothers were raped
right.
by those
No, not-
bastards.
Right.
Okay? But it happened. But it happened. Maybe we don't like that we were brought here and forced to believe in this language and everything else, but it happened. Okay? Why can't you try to find the value of that and try to dismiss it and say everything came from Africa? Because we are a very unique people. We're a result of technology. When they had ships that could go other places, and before they had the ships and everything, there was no mingling of the races. But what happened to us, we got caught up real big in that technology because they went and brought us over here, and then we had to mingle with them. And I just don't see how we could just dismiss that like it didn't happen.
No, I was never dismiss it because it's a part of history, but it's a small portion of history. If we're looking at a history book, that's maybe one chapter. When you got, 100 pages or chapters that have documented history of Africa. Africa is over 100,000 to maybe millions of years of age. Now, our experience here in America may cover 500 years. Let's give it that. We cannot dismiss it because it has had a tremendous impact on us, but we also cannot dismiss or negate the time before that.
No, we can't.
Okay.
But what I'm hearing here is you're negating all the rest of it because we don't like it. And we don't. None of us like it. But being realistic, we have to accept the fact that it happened. Okay? So you said over and over again, everything from Africa, everything from Africa. Sure, we got a lot from Africa. But we brought something because of our survival here that's very unique. It's a very unique history that starts in those cabins in the South. And I've always maintained the reason we don't want to do that because we've always been ashamed of slavery. We didn't put a positive on what those folks were able to do so we can be here today. And Africa had nothing to do with that. Okay? Africa had absolutely nothing to do with our survival after we got here.
Well,
But the thing about that is no one is dismissing African American contributions to Pan-Africanism, and so it's embracing all of that.
It sounded like you all were.
Huh? No,
Okay.
absolutely not. So we're Pan-Africanism embraces African American culture. It embraces Afro-Caribbean culture. It embraces African culture on the continent. It embraces all of that is incorporated into Pan-Africanist identity, and it's all welcome. And so the thing about that is that Pan-Africanism celebrates American culture and American contributions and American heroes. And so Dr. King is not just an American hero, he's a Pan-Africanist hero. And so Nelson Mandela is he's not an African hero. He's celebrated worldwide. He's an African hero. And so we celebrate everyone's contributions within the diaspora. And so it's not that anyone's dismissing African contributions or African heritage, African American heritage, or the African American legacy or African Americans' contribution to pushing Black folks forward.
Okay, I'm glad to hear you say that.
And I would add even this, a great example is that coming out of our enslavement, you know, prior to that, they didn't have public education in the South. Who brought forth the idea of public education, really, in order to give it to our children? It was Black people of African descent, saying those who had been formerly enslaved and denied the opportunity to read, to learn how to read and write. No, I'm not ashamed of what we went through. Now, those who did it to us should be ashamed, but that's on them.
That's the difference.
Yeah, but the idea, we should look at the fact that our ancestors were so determined to fight for their freedom, to fight for their humanity, to reclaim, try to establish justice in the society. And many of those things have been on the backs of us. We have brought those things forward because we want to live in a just society. We want to live in a world of democracy. So I think we should honor those who have gone through that experience, our ancestors, and raise them up. But as my brother's saying, we should see them as a part of the collective of the Pan-African history and culture.
Okay. Well, we're about to wrap up. Caleb, you want to?
No, so I wanted to give Brother Andor a chance to bring this discussion to today. And so you have a lot of folks here in this country who are going to ask, well, why is it relevant to them today in this world, in this society, in this country? And I just wanted to give you a chance to address that and let people know why it's relevant. Why is Pan-Africanism relevant?
Great way to wrap it up.
And yeah, talk about that and talk about how important that unity is.
You know, I think most of us would agree that we want unity. We need unity as a people. The idea of Pan-Africanism promotes the need for us to unify. It's a movement to unify us. Why is it important? Because our unity, our survival really depends on our unity. Because in a world where everyone is coming together to claim what's theirs and claim what's ours, we must be unified in order to defend what is ours. Here in America, on the continent, and everywhere where African people exist or live. Also, we are the builders, I think, of the new world. Now, people have ideas about what the new world will look like. I think as a people, when we come together, we have the resources on the continent of Africa. I mean, we have the gold, the diamonds, the magnesium, the lithium. We have the future, the green future. All the resources are in Africa. But again, I say the most important resource is really us, the people. So when we come together, we have the numbers, which are going to be, because I think we was mentioning earlier, and you had shared the information about when we look at the youth, it is on the continent of Africa where you have the youngest groups of people. The youth is there. So they are really the future. So all I'm saying is that we are the key to the future of humanity.
Anda, Brother Anda, I want to thank you for coming in and joining us today. I think it's been a lively discussion, and I hope our viewers got a lot out of it, and we'll have to have you back at a later date, maybe to continue.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. So we'll be right back with Hot Topics. The hot topic is Stand Your Ground is a justification for murder. We'll be right back with you.